For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strategies Global. I'm Surya Gangatharan and good evening. Last week, an Indian naval submarine docked at Jakarta port in Indonesia. And we also have reports about India getting port facilities in Subang in North Sumatra. There were reports about India and Indonesia also initiating a security dialogue with perhaps a focus on China. So what exactly are these two countries doing? I have with me Pankaj Saran, former Deputy National Security Advisor, who's been involved with the Indonesia relationship during his days in the Prime Minister's office. Welcome, Pankaj Saran. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much, Surya. Nice to be here.
So what are we doing with Indonesia? How has this Indonesia policy and involved? We were rather cool to them for many years, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, actually. I think the Indian establishment always recognized the strategic importance of Indonesia. The question was how to translate this into effective cooperation and to promote cooperation which benefits us and Indonesia. So we've had several of our prime ministers reaching out to Indonesia. The current Prime Minister Modi went to Indonesia. Then Indonesia was a part of the Republic Day celebrations in 2018 when they came for the Republic Day as chief guests along with the rest of the ASEAN. In addition, of course, we have foreign minister level visits, and then we also, of course, had cooperation and discussions and a channel between the two national security advisors. That was at like an apex level. Below that, of course, we had the maritime dialogue, we had terrorism dialogue, etc. What we have found is that for many reasons, the cooperation has not reached the kind of intensity that we would have liked. Given Indonesia's strategic importance and its proximity to India, because if you were to just look at the map, there is no doubt that Indonesia is a critical neighbor for India. And our Navy has understood that and knows it very, very well. But the rest of our system also has to understand this. And the Indonesian side also has to be more responsive than they have so far been. And of course, Indonesia has tried to maintain a somewhat low profile in the region. And they avoid getting into strategic contestation. That's their nature. And we have to live with that. But keeping that in mind, we should continue really to persevere and push and widen this dialogue. And I think that is actually happening for the last few years. I think especially in the last 2 years, we've definitely made some progress.
So what are we looking for? What do we want? Apart from their strategic location, which is obviously of interest to us, what are we looking from them?
There are many things. So on the strategic, it's important to basically internalize the fact that from the Andaman Indira Point to Aceh in Indonesia, the distance is about 80 to 100 nautical miles. It's really so close. We share the continental shelf, the exclusive economic zone. Some of it is still not clarified. So it's just the implications of that we want to ensure that we develop that kind of natural linkage with the maritime neighbor, which sits on the Malacca Strait, the Sunda, the Lombok. They actually control in some sense the critical sea lanes of communication. So that's the first, I would say, importance of Indonesia. The second, which is equally significant for India, is the composition of their population. Their ambition to become a moderate Islamic country in an environment where they also have sizable Hindu minority, and their own struggle and fight against radicalized radicalization and terrorism. So what we can learn from them and what we can exchange with them in terms of intelligence, in terms of, because during the Afghan crisis earlier, many years ago, they were actually directly affected through their own Indonesian youth going to Afghanistan, fighting during the Mujahideen time, and then coming back to Indonesia and creating huge problems for them. So Indonesia's fight against terrorism, against radicalized youth, which is a huge population. They have a population of 275 million. It's a large country, and so many similar cultural traits. So that's the second pillar of cooperation. And I think the third pillar, of course, has to be the economic potential of Indonesia in terms of the natural resources. And the fourth, I would say, is naturally we are both neighbors of China, and for them it's important what China does in their region, and likewise for us. So there is opportunity for two medium-sized large countries to establish their own equilibrium, to conduct relationship in cutting across sectors. I mean, for example, the Ministry for Maritime Affairs is huge. It's one of the most important ministries. So these are some of the really important areas of which dictate why we must look at Indonesia much closer than we have been, and try to overcome some of the inertia on the Indonesian side. I think we are very keen. We are ready.
Would you say they face similar pressures from China of the kind that we do?
Yeah, of course. I mean, but they've learned to say, if you look at, say, for example, Indonesia-China trade is about, 160 billion or something. Mm-hmm. Their trade with India is just about 25 billion.
Yeah.
So the economic integration with China is clearly much more than it is with us. But having said that, there is a lot of Chinese origin and Chinese investment in Indonesia, big Chinese money, which is very powerful in the economy. But on the other hand, they also have problems on the maritime and the naval domain. The Natuna Island and the Sea of Natuna has been a zone of conflict and friction between China and Indonesia, to the extent that we've had the President of Indonesia having his presidential and cabinet meetings in Natuna to signal to China on the fundamental issue of sovereignty of Indonesia. So they have this kind of dual track relationship with China. So on the political and strategic side, and then on the economic. But my assessment is that they don't also want to get into a position where they make choices, and they want to stay away from the US-China contestation in the region. They are uneasy with Chinese domination, so they actually have a fairly robust interaction with the Americans, with the Australians, most importantly. They issued their own version of an Indo-Pacific document. They deal with us. They have good relations with Japan. So they try to diversify and hedge their bets vis-a-vis China.
So domestically, would you say the army's input into security is the dominant thing there, given the history of army rule in that country?
Yeah, I think the army is important. I think the intelligence services are very important. And they are, like, for example, it's a well-known outfit. It's called Detachment 88. Mm-hmm. It comes under the police. Their only responsibility is to address the problem of radicalization and terrorism and extremism. So they have they have a very well-structured program to prevent and to cure and to resettle or rehabilitate youth which has got radicalized. So the army also constitutes an important pillar of decision making. Of course, democracy is now come, and we have multi-party elections, and the current president is an outcome of that. But I would say that the security establishment continues to be quite influential in decision making.
In much of Southeast Asia, we do find that army elites continue to play a major role, Is there any special outreach the MEA does to them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, for example, Thailand, the army is so powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, the clergy is powerful, the Buddhist clergy.
Yeah.
So you have the clergy, you have the royalty, you have the army. These are the pillars of the state, let's say in Thailand, for example. I mean, similarly, in Vietnam, in Malaysia, it's a different cast of characters. But yes, definitely, we are very conscious of this, and therefore, you have actually a security dialogue at the level of the NSA. You have outreach by, let's say, the navies, and so on. So, there is that outreach, there is that full understanding about the power equations within Indonesia and in Southeast Asia. And we work overtime with them. And, a lot of them actually also have monarchies. So, that also is an aspect of dealing with them.
Have they shown any interest in the kind of military hardware that we have? If you struck deals in Philippines, apparently we're exploring things in Vietnam. Have the Indonesians shown any?
No, they have. I mean, they showed interest in the Brahmos. And that was serious interest. But this is work in progress. But absent that, the degree of our exercises and training and other cooperation is actually growing quite well. To the extent that the Indonesians are comfortable with it. They always, we discussed it, they always try to balance their military and, navy outreach to the regional countries. So subject to that, we are okay. I mean, in terms of Coast Guard cooperation, in terms of naval cooperation, in terms of HADR, in terms of other things. So military hardware is definitely something which is on our agenda, it's on the horizon. As I said, the Brahmos was a serious discussion with Indonesia. If we persevere, then it's possible we might also then make a breakthrough there.
What about Subang Port? It's been in the news for a long time, but we get no, details are hard to come by.
Yeah, Sabang actually, it's interesting. When the two leaders met a few years ago, Prime Minister Modi and President Jokowi, they agreed that India and Indonesia will cooperate in the joint development of the Subang Port, which is in the province of Aceh, which is largely a Islamic-dominated province. It has its own problems with extremism and radicalization and terrorism. So that was the foundation of the decision to move forward. And so we moved forward. Groups were set up, joint groups, to look at what precisely India can do. The approach always from our side was we will do it jointly with the Indonesians. And we will do civil work, not naval.
No neighbor.
And the port itself is very small. It's a very primitive port. So the initial decision was to start with maybe one jetty and develop it, because the basic infrastructure is there. So the task was basically to upgrade and to create some additional facilities so that Indonesian ships could use it, obviously, and Indian commercial vessels and others could also use it. And that could also be used to, conduct trade with Aceh and the Andaman Nicobar Islands. So the governor of Aceh has visited the Andamans, and our teams have also gone to Aceh. Our technical teams have visited Sabang to study what are the facilities, what needs to be done. So that is going on, but it's not, we have to keep in mind that it's a small port. We see it as a complement to the Andamans, and it's reflective of their confidence in us, in our capabilities, that they want India to actually help them develop it. And it's come as a voluntary request.
Actually, it came from them.
From Indonesia. It came from that. And so we said, yes, for sure, because we have a lot of experience in port development. So that is how the lay of the land is. And it is not a naval facility, it does not a military application. It is primarily for commerce and trade. That's basically it. Because a lot of, for example, the boulders and stones and other raw material is actually being ferried from Aceh into Andaman and Nicobar, and the economics of it is much cheaper than the same items being transported, let's say, from mainland India. If to Andaman, say from Chennai or Odisha. So this is shorter and much cheaper. So there is a lot of attraction in the Andamans to, improve infrastructure. And then the other thing, of course, as part and parcel of this regional connectivity approach, which India is following, is that apart from the port, you also want to develop airports. You also want to develop infrastructure for cruises, for tourism here, for airports. So you create a whole ecosystem out there, which generates revenue, jobs, economic revival and activity. So that's basically the thing. Of course, Aceh, there was, because of this problem of their internal problem there, they were a little cautious. But the governor of Aceh, for example, is very keen to move forward much faster with India. So let's see how quickly we can actually then. So a lot of the work has been done. The technical feasibility, the drawings, the project description. It's now a question of actually going forward to implement, and it will be good if we can do this, because in a sense we are the closest to Sabang. There's no other country which is as close to Sabang as possible. So it could be a wonderful force multiplier for them and for us.
So it does have a security implication going down the road.
Anything can have. I mean, because the entire country is located in such a way that, they're sitting on the most sensitive geography, naval, maritime geography of Southeast Asia, where China, Japan, Korea, India, we're also dependent on those narrow straits and those seaways. So that's something which is a given, and everyone knows it. So naturally, all eyes are in that region. And Andaman, of course, Andaman and Nicobar, we sit on the Malacca Straits. So for us, the Andaman and Nicobar, as we all know, has dual kind of significance, both economic, civil, and strategic.
So sending a submarine there to Jakarta, what are we? I mean, okay, it's a normal navy to navy exchange. You can say it's just that. What is the other message that's going out? What is the signal that's going out?
Well, the signal is, as you can guess, it's literally signaling that the Indian Navy has the capability to travel as far as Indonesia. Number two, that Indonesia is ready to accept the Indian Navy and an Indian submarine. So it speaks of the strategic trust between India and Indonesia. And this is a signal which is going loud and clear in the region, including to China. And it's not directed against China, but the fact of the matter is that we have the opportunity and we have the opening. So I think it's a big step in terms of building this kind of military and naval confidence, because they have a large navy, and of course we do. So these kind of things, typically, when you enter into these kinds of exchanges, you do it with multiple objectives in mind, including as force projection. And if Indonesia is willing to offer its facilities to host an Indian submarine, I think it's very significant. And we should kind of persevere with because you also have, as I said, you have postcard, you have fishing, you have piracy, you have the other big problem now after the Rohingya issue in Bangladesh is people smuggling and human trafficking. So there is a lot that is happening in the region, and in fact, one would even argue that perhaps our navy is probably overstretched in trying to meet its regional obligations. And during the COVID period, there were lots of ship visits back and forth with oxygen and other COVID supplies. So this is natural territory. And I think the first revelation of the importance of Indonesia and its strategic significance came out of the tsunami in 2004, where we were one of the first countries to respond to Indonesia. And culturally and civilizationally, again, it's, we need to internalize it much, much more about Bali, about Java. It's in the books, in the scriptures, in our old texts, whether you go to Jakarta, you see the chariot of Krishna and Arjun. It's an Islamic country. So it's all there, their names, a lot of the language. So in fact, they are literally natural partners. And plus, we've also had this whole history of coal imports and energy imports, which got into some problem.
Yeah.
But still, it's a huge market for our products. So on every parameter, I would say Indonesia is, and we don't really have any serious bilateral differences with them. Yeah, there is this problem of demarcation on the continental shelf and the EEZ. That is there. But for the rest, really, we are, we have very cordial ties. So that's how it is.
There are all these unilateral that have come up. Do you see India, Indonesia, perhaps some other country kind of occupying the same geographic or maritime space, working together?
I think so. I think this is the need of the hour, to create these circles of cooperation. You have a ripple effect, literally speaking. I mean, this is the sea. But you have the Mekong-Myanmar cooperation, for example. But I would say a country which really fits the bill is Bangladesh. And if you can have a India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, at least at the level of scholars or strategic experts, and later on, maybe even at the level of governments, to talk basically the two most important issues in the region. One is terrorism, and the second is maritime cooperation and threats from the maritime domain. I mean, the whole issue of maritime security. And, they are both Islamic countries. They both are committed to a kind of a moderate version of Islam. We have a multicultural, multi-plural society. We also want to discuss how to combat extremism and radicalization. And on the maritime, as we just discussed, you have the Bay of Bengal, you have the Andaman Sea. So I am very tempted with this idea of an India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, kind of a set of countries where we talk among ourselves. There is so much to talk about. Even Islamic preachers, the navies of the three countries, the coast guards of the three countries. And of course the cultural links which bind us to Bangladesh and bind us to Indonesia. And I think it will be, in my view, I think it's a win-win for all three.
So last question. The G20 is upon us. We are the presidency there. And Indonesia hand over to us. They took over at the time of the Ukraine invasion and they faced the full brunt of that, There are lessons there in how they handled it. Would you say there are things that we can learn from the way they managed to,
Yeah, I think there are lots of lessons. I think the way they withstood pressures and went ahead with the G20 meetings and the summit, I think was remarkable. I mean, they did not succumb to threats to boycott Russia. Of course, President Putin didn't attend, but they went ahead with everything. They took a very, very balanced approach to the crisis in Ukraine. And they kind of lived through everything. And I think right at the end of the summit, the last few hours of the negotiation, we also pitched in to help them. But I think they did a great job. And, and this is when they had zero preparation. Because Ukraine kind of blew in the face of everyone. On the other hand, we are more fortunate because, we have much better prepared. And we've also learned lessons from Indonesia. But I think they did a very good job.
And lessons to be learned from them.
Yes, yeah.
Ambassador Saran, thank you very much. As always, a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Surya. Thank you very much.
And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, do subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram. Thank you and good night.